Okay, so we have these two that you can choose out of 3 options. There were 4. I'll tell you the 4th one if you guys ever want to take stuff home and try it out. And then there's this final one right here. All right, now I'm going to actually jump first into doing this final one with you guys like we did last time. And then on these 3, what I'm going to do is paint them first, and you guys watch, and you guys get to decide what you want to do. Is that okay? I will make actually one exception now that I'm thinking about it. I am going to do this one. I made a little box at the bottom. And you guys might see, but there is a little bit of this weird gooey stuff on my paper, right? And what that is this thing right here. Let's see if it focuses. It's called masking liquid or frisket, both. And it's basically kind of like a little bit of a rubber cement almost, but not quite as thick. And oftentimes, this one is pretty thick, but often other brands are a little bit thinner. And so just like a rubber cement, you probably don't want to use your brush on it to use. I would recommend to use either, in this case, this little dropper thing that does not work because the stuff is too thick. And you can draw with it like I did. And or the back of your brush, like the back handle of your brush. And then you can wipe it clean, because otherwise it can destroy your brushes. Now you can use it with the brush, but you have to rinse it out immediately. And in my opinion, this stuff in particular, this brand that I bought on a whim, which is different from what I did 2 or 3 years ago, is really thick and dries almost immediately in the brush and will ruin it. And yes, I have done that on my own brush, which was kind of a heartbreaker, but I learned my lesson. The other brand that I usually get is a lot more liquidy, and you have enough time to rinse it out with soap and water. So this one, just use that little dropper. Now, you'll notice that there's a different in color, right? You guys see the difference? This is dry. It's going to have a rubbery kind of feel to it. And the nice thing is, let me get some water going and some color. Let's do, what color should we do here? Let's do orange again? Okay. We haven't done like a really nice bright orange, have we? Now, I will say this, my orange is just a touch muddy. If you ever get muddy colors, especially like a yellow loves to get muddy, if you guys have ever done anything with yellow, you know that happens. I would recommend get a wet paper towel and just wipe it clean. Okay? All right, so we're going to do some orange. I've let it kind of sit in there a little bit, rehydrate the color, and then we're going to just paint it, and we're going to take a look. After this dries, we're going to take a look at what we can do next with this. Oops, it's not on the camera. Okay, there we go. So it's just painted in there. Now, if you're at home and you don't have this masking frisket, you know, obviously you probably don't want to use this technique. But if you're here in class, you can use it. All I ask is there's right by, what was your name again? Jocelyn. Oh, yeah, that's right. Right by Jocelyn, there's some hand sanitizer. Please sanitize before using this so that we can keep everybody safe. All right. All right, let's do this technique together. So are you guys ready? Did you guys put some water into some of your colors here? Make sure you do that. I have a little bit. All right. This technique that we're going to use here on the end, let me adjust the camera. There we go, that looks a little better. Is called, oh, I don't have any paper towels. This technique that we're going to do on the end, oh, this one's called a frisket. But this one's called glaze. All right. When you guys think of the word glaze, let's be honest, what do you guys think about? What's that? There you go, right there. Right after my own heart. That wasn't even a pause there. We're like right on that. All right, donuts. All right, who's ever been to Krispy Kreme and they see the donuts go through and the whole process because they have a big window there? Yeah. Okay, let me ask you this. Okay, because they just show the glazed ones, right? What happens first? Does the cooking in the oil happen first or the glaze? Okay, so why do they do that? Why don't they just slap the glaze on the raw donut and cook it with it on? Okay, glaze will melt. Okay, same goes with this technique. I like to use this, hopefully you remember it. It's a way to paint on top of dry paint. If I paint on top of wet paint, what technique will it pretty much look like?
Wet on wet.
Yeah, it will look like wet on wet. So this is another technique to paint on top of dry stuff. Now, I left mine purposefully a little bit splotchy. This usually, if you paint like this on an assignment, I'll probably not give you high points because this looks really gross. So one way we can deal with that is to, if I take my red again, and I'm just going to do a corner. I don't want you to do the whole thing because we're going to test out a couple things. If I take a corner, I can take and paint the red on and let it dry and maybe even do 2 or 3 coats, and I can even out the splotchiness. So that is an option if you end up with some splotchiness. Usually that happens if you don't have enough water. Okay, it's not quite dry brush, and it's just not quite anything else. It's just kind of just splotchy. Okay, and then again, this is typically what I would have you guys use if you're not very good at the flat wash. And I think I only saw one person with a mediocre flat wash. I was like super impressed with all of you guys, so thank you very much. I was shocked because it is really difficult. And honestly, I was also shocked that some people did not do so hot on the wet on wet. They either, you could see paint strokes, or they let everything blend too much where it looked like one color, transparent like. So if you notice in Canvas, and I made that comment, I said just paint in the margins a small little wet on wet and see if you can get a better job. So you might want to check that. If you have paint strokies and if it got too mixed where it doesn't look like all these weird stuff happening in there. Okay, another thing we can do with glaze, and I'm looking at my stuff here and I'm looking for one that doesn't have a ton of water. I'm gonna do a dry brush. And let's see if I have, okay, that's a good dry brush. I can dry brush on top of a glaze. Now I use black. It's not going to show me too much of an effect of what a glaze can do. I'll do a different one with a different technique. But you can see how you can do this. And the nice thing about these type of little lines and texture with a dry brush is that it looks like a technique called hatching. Has anyone heard that name before, hatching? And can tell me what it might be? Do you know, Jocelyn? Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Nobody has heard that term hatching before? Okay, it is a pen technique with drawing with pen where you make lines to make your shading. Because if you push hard with a pencil, you can get dark, right? But with a pen, you can't push the pen harder and get darker. Does that make sense? So you have to use lines. And so this is kind of similar to that, and we're actually going to be learning that on our first lesson. Okay, you can also do a transparent, so let's get a lot of water. Let's do a blue, and let's see what happens when I paint blue on top of red. Because you guys know that if I do a watered down color, right, that the paper underneath is going to affect it. So who wants to make a guess of what this blue will look kind of like on top of red when it's watered down? What do you guys think? Yeah, it's going to have a little bit of a purple tone because we're not painting a light blue here on white, we're painting it on red, and so the water, okay, will make it transparent, and it will mix. It won't like literally mix with, but the light will mix with both the blue and the red and bounce back into our eyes as a purple. Do you guys see? I didn't do anything different between these two things. This looks blue, this looks purple. And all it is because I painted on top of a different color. Now, you can do any of these techniques on here. I could paint a little area and do a wet on wet on top of the same color. It would make an interesting effect. You guys can experiment with that. The last one I will do with this is I am going to paint a green. Now, green and red have a very special relationship to each other. Does anybody know what it is?
Complementary.
Complementary. All right, and complementary means that they look good together next to each other, but they don't really typically mix well together. There are exceptions. Now I need to get this a little bit more watery. All right, and so when you paint green on top of red, or mix green and red with a wet on wet, or any complements, you're going to get a brownish color. Now, you may ask yourself why. Let me tell you a little story. How many people here in elementary school got to do painting? And they started to discover that mixing two colors makes a third color, right? You start learning that. We'll go over that a little bit later. But guess what? You try and mix all three of your colors, your primary colors, red, yellow, blue, and you think you're going to get something super cool because two colors make something cool. What do you end up getting? You get a brownish, greenish, grossish, grayish, blackish color. Okay, so as you think about that, red and green are opposites. You also get this with blue and orange and yellow and purple. When you mix those colors, you are actually mixing all three primaries, because if you think about it, what is green essentially if we break it down into two parts? What is green's area? Blue and yellow. So you think about it, you have blue, yellow, and now red, it's going to make kind of a grossish color. Now sometimes it's kind of cool to have that color if you're careful, and we'll talk about this in a couple lessons if we get to it. Okay? But I do want you to know, if you ever mix complements, especially in wet on wet, you're going to get these weird, gross colors, possibly. It depends. It really depends on a lot of factors, the amount of water, the amount of one color or the other color, and oftentimes it can look kind of cool, but it can also look really awful too. So just keep that in mind with complements. All right, so as we look at this one, it's not quite dry yet. I maybe used a little too much water. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to these two, and I just want you guys to watch, and then when the time arrives, we'll have you guys work on them too. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint both of these. And both of them need to be a similar amount of color. They both need to be a medium to high amount of color. All right, and preferably probably on this one right here, a medium, and this one definitely a high. So I'm just going to pick the same color. I'm just going to go with a blue. Let's do a purple on this one. I like purple for this project, and then I'm going to do like a blue on this one. So let's get lots of water, lots of color, and I'm just going to paint this. Don't you guys do this with me. You're going to want to wait. Uh-oh, another one? What's the name before I take it?
Lindy.
Lindy? Yeah, she's just right there. Thank you. All right, now I don't want this dry. Okay. Oh, I should have painted this one first. Dang it. Oh, well. You guys will learn from my poor mistakes. All right, I want this kind of watery, but I also want it colorful for the effect. So I need water in here, and I need color. And what I'm going to do is right here I have some rubbing alcohol, and I'm going to drop it on here. And this is a fun little technique, but you have to have it wet, and you have to have a lot of color, or at least medium color, or you won't get these cool little things. Look at those cool little rings. Pretty sweet. All right. And I like it with purple because these secondary colors like purple, orange, and green are a mixture, and so sometimes you use them and you get some weird stuff. And you're welcome to use a couple different colors if you want. You could even do a wet on wet and put alcohol drops on it. All right. All right, and then this square I'm going to paint blue. And this one, you're going to have to be a little bit patient with me because I need it with a lot of color, but I also don't want it too wet. This is tricky. This one we want it wet with a lot of color. And this one's a little trickier. We don't want it too wet, and so let's see what happens. Maybe I should have done a different color. Oh well. I need more color in here. I'm gonna put a little bit of, no, I don't want that. Maybe I'll paint a little bit of orange so you guys, no, I don't want to do that. Maybe we'll paint a little bit of yellow in there. I have this dirty, gross yellow. That's why I haven't used it yet. But I need lots of color, but not a lot of water. So this is the trickiest part of this. So sometimes that means I need to let it dry. Oh, that looks awful. I'm sorry. If you're watching at home, you're probably laughing, and in class you guys are polite and not laughing at me too much. Let's put some more blue in there. Alright, that's not too bad of a color. Okay, but I notice I have lots of water, but if I use too much of my paintbrush to soak up the water, I'm going to miss my color. Does that make sense? So I'm going to need to be a little bit patient on this. And I'm going to let it just start to dry. And we're going to start noticing that water and the moisture in the painting has some different levels. So as you can see here, we see some levels, and you can see them pretty drastically. How do you know on this one where the wetter areas are on this one as it's starting to dry out? How can you tell the difference? Can you guys tell the difference? Yeah, the darker areas are going to be a little bit wetter, and it's a little hard to see on the camera, but one thing that will happen as things dry and they're not too wet, alright, what will happen is, especially on this one right here, there is a mild reflection. You see that mild reflection now as I put it in the light? Whereas here, it's really wet and it's going to be a high reflection. So mild reflection, high reflection. And what I need on this one, and I probably played with it too much, it's my own fault, is I need it to be a dull, mild reflection for this next technique to work right. So this is still taking forever, so maybe if I take real quick here while we're waiting for this to dry, and I do kind of a quick one of that on top of my other frisket, let it dry a little quicker than this one. We'll show you what happens when we peel away the frisket. And you do have to let the paper dry. Okay, so this middle area is starting to feel that dull. Let me just use my paper towel and get the edges a little bit drier and let it dry a little bit quicker. I probably wouldn't recommend this normally because the unfortunate part is I'm taking the color out, and I do want color in here. And that's what makes this part a little bit tricky. And you don't want it too wet or else it will not work. That's the tricky part about watercolor. Now, if I was allowed to take off my mask, I would probably blow on this a little bit. And you can also use, if you were at home and you become a semi-professional watercolor artist on your own time, you can get a hairdryer and you can kind of dry things to the right state. I have one student who I taught many years ago who does this stuff on Instagram. Okay, we're almost there, so it might not work completely right, but I don't want you guys sitting here staring at me forever. So I have here salt. Now, what's salt going to do to the water? What do you guys think? You have a guess? Yeah. Yeah, it's going to dry it. And what it will do is it will take the color with it. And so what it's going to do, if you do it at the right time, and this is the technique I hate the most because, well, for two reasons. One is because I stink at it. And the other reason is because, even though, like, what's odd is I'll teach you guys this, and some of you guys, like, get it perfect, and then I just feel foolish because I can rarely get it perfect. But the other reason why I don't really like it is because it creates a giant mess. I do ask that if you use the salt, please just wipe the leftover on the floor. Once this whole area is dry, and not just the paper, but the salt also is dry, you can wipe it away. You don't want to keep it on there. All right, and so much like these, it does. You have to wait for it to dry. Now this is dry, and what I can do here is peel away my frisket. This still isn't dry. Can't believe I did that. And look at that. So as you guys see these like circles that I put on here, little patterns, when this does dry, I'm going to peel it away. If I do it while it's wet, can anyone guess what might happen? Anybody ever deal with wet paper before? Yeah, what happens? Yeah, so if I'm not careful and I try and peel this away while it's still wet, it will tear. So I did do this real quick one. So I'll have to show you guys later. At home, this is what it'll look like if you use masking frisket. Mr. White was telling me, he teaches a lot of painting classes, that you can use masking tape a little bit, and sometimes it works similar to this. So if you're at home, you can try a little masking tape since we don't have that. And hopefully most people have salt at home, right? And rubbing alcohol, maybe. Okay, so with that being said, I will probably maybe take a photo of this once the rubbing, no, not the rubbing alcohol, once the salt is dry, and hopefully we'll be able to see the interesting pattern it makes. It makes a really weird pattern. And hopefully you'll be able to see this too. So I'll put this on canvas once it's dry. For everyone else, you guys will want to finish off these last two, and I'm going to have these things up front. Just always wash your hands before you use them, and make sure you use them at the right time, okay, right time. And I only have limited stuff, so don't rush me all at once.